Hi, my name is Patrick with Craftalicious and Techdelicious, and today I'm going to make a tier list. Tier lists are very popular, and this is a tier list of games that I have played and I own. There are some criterias here. I wanted to minimize it because there's so many things that kind of falls within the survival open world crafting type games. Um, if you start including something like the XCOM style games, then it the whole list explodes. I have certainly tons of those. So I wanted to at least keep it to games that are survival, open world, crafting, first or third person, meaning not communal where you're having a whole group that you control. Now, some of these gonna be a little bit on the edge of it, and they're gonna have less of the other kind of features. And I will try to explain it as what the crafting is, right? So if you look here on the right hand side, those are the kind of criteria that I'm talking about. So crafting, open world, if it's procedural, seated, crafted, graphics, style, or animation. So that's kind of sort of how the animation, if it's janky, if it's fluid, if it's smooth, if it's kind of like, it's almost like they have used to, what is that word I'm looking for? When they have sensors all over the body. You know what I mean. Survival mechanics, that would be food, death, combat, how that kind of is included in the games themselves. And there's going to be a plethora of different ones. They all more or less span the entire genre and the entire spectrum from fantasy to future. Horror even, right? So I'm just going to do a quick little overview of the game themselves, the different mechanics, and how I feel about the game themselves. Now, I did forget one that I want to put in here, and that is story. If I could spell it. Plus story. So with story, that has to do with kind of there are so many games where you don't really have a story per se. There are certain things that pushes you forward in order to complete it, but it's not an actual story. More like in order to continue this, you're gonna have to learn how to craft that, right? That is not a story per se. It kind of leaves it very open-ended. Some have excellent kind of pushing you forward with story elements that really truly feels like you're part of a whole three acts of a movie. So, without further ado, let's talk about them. In no specific order. So let's start with Nightingale. That's something that you will see on my channel that I have played a little bit. I'm on my second episode of that. I like Nightingale. This is definitely right now an A for me. It checks the boxes for a lot of things. The crafting is some of the deepest that you have in any game, period. Open world is a little bit seeded, procedural almost, and then some crafted. So all the story realms that's part of the game itself, they're crafted. The procedural part is the different realms, then the biomes, the three that you have right now, they're going to add more. So that's the swamp, forest, and desert. They're all kind of seeded. Every time you open up a new realm and you go to these, they're a little bit different with a little bit different options and quests. The story realms are completely handcrafted, both quest-wise and everything else. So it has both. That's pretty cool. It also has a story that involves puck. Animation is kind of like gas punk, cartoonish a little bit. I like the style. It is a little bit janky. You really want to do first person. When you do third person, it looks really goofy when they're running. I know that they're improving that. Initially, it was never intended to be third person, so you can see that. But combat and things like that feels relatively fluid. It looks nice. Survival mechanics, you do have to eat, you do have to sleep, or eventually you're gonna, yeah, well, you're not going to do so well. You're basically not going to have enough stamina left. So you have the stamina, you have a few combinations. Combat options are not super deep, but as far as weapon wise, you do have weapon wise. And that has to do with the crafting. So everything from firearms to bows to swords to axes and all those things. They're all part of the whole thing. Death, you don't have, I do believe you don't drop everything on death. Actually, I think death is the end of it and then you have to restart it. You do have a companion that you can find and bring with you and they can revive you. So that's always good. And then, of course, they have the difficulty of the different realms that you can set, so you don't have to be all on the bleeding edge of almost dying all the time. There are health potions, food gives you bonuses, but you still have that part of it. And story, I love the story. When they redid all the realms with stories, they added a lot of flavor. Now, the story is not super deep, but it's still in early access that still have things to add to it. TerraTech World, I did like that one. There's you're pretty much building a mech. You don't ever see you, so is it solo or the first or third person? Well, kind of sort of third person mech, right? Um, it looks like it's just a handcrafted world. Right now, you don't have a procedural, no seated. It's just the same kind of world all the time. You do have crafting options. They're not so deep. It's more like you construct a kind of factory process at the basics, but you can pretty much craft and add things to your mech and make the mech kind of your own with all the different features that's part of it. Mostly wheel. I haven't really seen anything where you can have like a crab legs or spider legs or anything like that, but you do have boat and you have flying. Graphics style, that's a little bit difficult to explain. It's kind of like very Lego-ish, but not necessarily in a bad way, kind of cartoonish, kind of that way. You do have a lot of combat. Obviously, you are fighting other robots and you kind of can steal their parts, so that's kind of a cool mechanic of itself. Survival mechanics, well, you don't really have, I mean, you're a mech, you don't eat, right? Death means that you get blown up, that's it. You don't have the compatriots or anything else, it's just you. Story, there really isn't anything. The only thing that pushes you forward is that you go and kind of do the things that gets you to the next part of the things that you can do, like, okay, now I can make a boat, or now I can do flying. So it's not a lot of depth there. The reason why I put it on B right now, it's almost teetering on a C, to be honest, is because it's kind of, other than just doing those mechanical things and progressing through unlocking certain things, it's not really that much more there. Okay, Generation Zero. I'm gonna give that a solid in between B and C. I should love it. It's actually a first-person kind of type game where you can co-op, of course, set in the 80s in Sweden. So I should absolutely love it. You have crafting, obviously. Everything from picking up different weapons that you find and then eventually making your own base and upgrading weaponry. The crafting is not super deep, but you certainly blow up a bunch of robots that have invaded it. Some kind of AI story, if I remember it correctly when I was playing it. But you are blowing so much ammo to just blow up one robot, and you end up with robots everywhere. It gets tedious to just blow up robots. Certainly goes from everything from small one to huge boss kind of robots. To me, it just felt tedious. The story is there, it's just not very deep in my opinion. It wasn't anything that was grabbing me. Kind of halfway, I kind of sort of just like, well, I'm just want to get to the end and see what happens, right? certainly lost a lot on me as far as I probably haven't played it as deep as some. It just wasn't that fun to do the same thing over and over and just hammer away on these robots until you got the legendary weapon that can just blow them up really easy. It was just too many random encounters everywhere for me to have fun. It is an open world, but it's completely crafted as far as I understand it. There is no procedural, there's not seeded. It's just the same map all the time. Aska. This is kind of communal. You're a boss, or you're the leader of a tribe. You've been thrown out by the gods. I really have fun with this one, so let's put it right there for now. So you're on an island. It is procedural seeded. I think it is seeded mostly, so it's an island, round the island. You can do some changes, adding the topographic terrain to be more of a hilly, more flat, and you go around and do the usual stuff. You pick up things, you craft, you build a tribe, and then you waken up your tribe members to do tasks for you. So then you go out, you find more things, you discover things, you fight bosses. There's not much of a story there. Again, the narrative is you're driven to unlock things in order to build out your tribe, and eventually you get raided. The reason why it's kind of more on the B side is that I like it. It has a sort of the graphics is not hyper realistic, but it's less cartoonish. It's kind of more like the enshrouded Valheim kind of type. It has some really good kind of survival mechanics in as far as the combat wise. What I don't care for is that you had to eat and drink all the time. And one of the worst features as part of it, yeah, let's slip down to B, now that I'm thinking about it, is that everything decays. Everything. Sticks, anything you have in the inventory. I don't know if rocks decay, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. So you pick up things and decay eventually. Now there's a lot of games that have decay as far as food. They spoil and perish. Nightingale doesn't. That's why I kind of like it. But it's just too much of the things. You have to eat and drink all the time. Things are just decaying. You have to pick them up. You have to tell your guys to go do certain things, and they just go and wave at you when they run out of things to do, or they don't understand, or their tools break. And the tools break all the time. That's kind of frustrating to me. Now this one is a little bit of a different one. So ancestors, mankind ancestors, is kind of like you take it from the first ape, right? And then you go towards, I do believe it ends with maybe Stone Age or something like that, when you have evolved enough. And it's an interesting thing on how you evolve your guy to have certain more of the characteristics of a modern human. Through learning how to use tools. The reason why I included it is that it's kind of light on the crafting side. The open world is it's completely crafted, but it's a lot of different biomes. Graphics it's very good graphics. It's more on the real side of things, and you can teach the rest of your tribe the different things that you learn. How to beat up a tiger, right? So in the beginning, you kind of sort of food. Survival mechanics is that, yeah, everything can kill you pretty much. And then you learn to be the killer yourself when you learn how to make spears and things like that. And you can teach your tribe how to use that. So that's kind of cool. So crafting on the light side, survival mechanics is basically, hey, are you ever going to become modern man? And try to survive with your tribe. But I enjoyed it as far as I was playing. Story is something you create. You are the story. You're the story of mankind. You're the one that are evolving to kind of more like a modern man. And you can see your choices really have an impact on how you do that and how quickly you evolve. So I found it really interesting. but I'm putting it more on the B side because I haven't played it enough and it doesn't have all the other things. Okay, moving on. This is Blight. I am gonna put that right now here. And that's because it's kind of janky. It's very early access. I think it's a solo dev, so I don't want to necessarily beat up on a solo dev. It's just that it's very basic. Crafting mechanics are all there, but it feels like they just took like they bought a bunch of assets, threw it together. Blight, something futuristic, zombie-like, something like that. So more on the horror side. The crafting options exist, of course. It was just like everything from the crafting portion, which was decent enough. There was no story to think of. The survival mechanics was just the standard. It's very boilerplatey to me, but I like to support different developers, so I got it when it was cheap. A loft, well, you see me playing that on my channel, and this is one that's kind of teetering right now on an S tier because of the vibe, but it's still an A tier for most part. It will probably slip up there if they really flesh out everything. Crafting, fairly deep, a little bit on the wonky side as far as how things snaps into place. It's not really good at that. You really have to struggle to get things to snap in right. But other than that, that's just minor things. It's an open world. It's kind of sort of procedural or seated on more. There is the basics of the different sectors, but all the new the kind of island that you go and seek out are all kind of not necessarily crafted per se, but they're seeded differently. So there is a number of islands that exist, so many, right, that you can visit. But how they're seeded and how what are showing up on those islands, that's going to be different. You have the story crafted islands, that would be the one with the frescoes. Those are the special islands that they're all the same, but they're all showing up in different areas depending on how you start up a new map. It's kind of wonky. I would say that the mechanics of the graphics is very on the cartoonish side, but it's kind of a little bit wonky still. Very stilted as far as running around and whatnot. I prefer to do the first person because third person looks a little bit wonky. Flying around though on the wings between islands is grade A. I should almost have a category for sound because the sound is awesome. That would be Nightingale Aloft have really awesome sound. It's just the way it fluidly when you fly around and engage in different story mechanics is just great. Food, you don't actually have to eat. You don't have to drink. It's not going to force you to that. You don't even have to sleep. All of those things gives you bonuses. So when you sleep, you get a bonus. When you drink some coffee, you get a bonus. When you eat certain foods, you get a bonus. Like pumpkin pie, the devil's fruit, you know. Death, just spawn back to your island. You don't even drop any of this stuff. Combat is very simplistic. You have bow, you have smacks, and then you have a couple of power combos that do heavy attacks that you unlock. Pretty standard, but I like it. Okay, Astromedica. Ooh, that one is creeping in even more on S tier. There's just a flavor over it that, no doubt, is kind of like Subnautica in space. It has very similar kind of graphic style. Crafting is still the standard. You build these space stations. You pick up things out floating in space. You build a space station, you equip them with certain things, and then you go and explore. There is a story here. It's not entirely fleshed out yet, but I can see seedlings of it. It is open world, but it's completely crafted as far as I can tell, which is fine. They're going to have several different sectors. When you looked at what's coming next, kind of the roadmap, it looks like it's really deep. Are they going to get there? I don't know how large they are as a dev team, but so far what I've seen that they're coming out this major update soon, and of course I want to jump on that, looks good. Why I like it over Subnautica, it's not necessarily they're kind of same flavor but different biomes, right? Different areas. Is that it's lit up. You can actually see things. Well, certainly when you go into a cave and it gets dark, you have your little torch. True. But if you ever play Subnautica, it looks and sounds awesome, and I will get to that. But then it gets dark, depressingly dark. Some areas are lit up with, lit up vegetation and whatnot. This one is pretty much lit up everywhere except for that green fart cloud, the toxic one. You get in there, you get lost, you don't know where you are. That's just the way it is. But I'm sure they're going to improve that. Astromedica just have a tremendous feel to it. It's just, you really feel the survival stuff. You have to eat and drink. They have adjusted that. It used to be too much. Just had to eat and drink all the time. But there's plenty of things. You can actually grow your own food, so you're not super dependent on it. Combat is very, very simplistic. Right now, you just have a laser rifle that don't shoot that far, and yeah, you will take damage. And unfortunately, you can craft more health packages. When you run out of the materials that seem to be finite, you can craft any more healing. So, but it's not a fleshed out story. It's only one sector. It's going to get bigger. Lens Island. Lens Island, third person, more on the cartoonish side. Not much when it comes to the animation. I'm going to put that on a B. I think mostly it's handcrafted stuff, but I might be wrong. I didn't play it too much, I'm sorry to say. But I played it long enough. I kind of sort of enjoyed it, but things felt janky. Like it didn't have a lot of animation choices, but it certainly have all the things from, crafting, moving around, sailing to different islands to explore. It's not super deep. I didn't feel that it had like an enormous story, but it was kind of vibey, like a loft, but in a different kind of perspective. So I don't really have too much to say on it. So let's put it right now for C tier until I played around a little bit more to it. I don't want to be too unfair to it. Forever Skies. That is an interesting game that I'm going to put right now here. I don't think it's complete. I don't think it has all the elements in it right now. But essentially something have happened to Earth. If you go below to a certain level, you will die. So you're floating around in your air balloon ship thing platform that you're building out. And you go to right at the top of buildings, go down. You are crafting more things in order to go to the next segment and area. It has very... again, I haven't played those games like... what is that? Craft something? Where you kind of go from one area to another. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was just something that didn't necessarily hook me directly. So I'm probably going to have to sit down and play that a little bit more and give it a better, probably a more fair score. Mines of Moria. Oh god, this has flavor all over it. I had so much fun playing this game. It's not a solid S tier, but it pretty much have everything. A little bit on the cartoonish side. You're playing one of the dwarves that get... this is kind of sort of after all the movies. And you're going back to Moria. And one way or another, you end up in the actual cave. There's a cave in. You're the only one there. Of course, you can play co-op. And you start to unlock. Now, there's two different modes. You have the story mode and you have just the open world. Your life, everything is your oyster, so to speak. Where everything gets procedural or randomly put together. Even the story mode has some random aspect to it. But it's a little bit more cobbled together better as far as where the different areas are. So the main core of those areas are pretty much the same, and then you have a little bit more of the procedural generated seeded around it. How they kind of piece together. it's just awesome. There is a story there, that there's this dark kind of dragon ones that have taken over Moria, and there are you're gonna run into, of course, the goblins and the orcs. It's just flavor. It just have a nice, cool flavor to it. And then, of course, you can unlock areas and then start crafting up your little base there. I just had so much fun, and I think um, the elements of the voice acting and whatnot feels very appropriate. You will recognize some of the voices as far as from the movies, and it's just a nice little interesting romp. Crafting is deep, open world. It has the procedural element, so if you start fresh, you're gonna feel that there's so new things to discover. Graphics is good. I think the animation will all appropriate as far as with the fighting, and of course you can get better weapons, better armor. It is a little bit gated in the fact that you kind of sort of come to a point where you have to have much better equipment in order to go and do the next area. So you can't just romp straight through it to the end. You kind of sort of have to stay enough in an area to build up to get the crafting mechanics in order to get to have the item to move on. Survival mechanics, eating, drinking, I think it was. I'm not sure about the drink, but definitely eating. Death, you drop everything, have to go back and pick it up. Combat had all the essentials of blocking and hitting. It's not super deep that way. Raid mechanics, they can end up raiding, and you can actually set how sensitive it is to raid you. So you have a lot of leeway and you have a lot of adjustments to do to just feel like it fits the way you like to play it.